Welcome to Signature Required. It is intended for Tennesseans by Tennesseans.
What makes them tick? What lights their fire?
We're pulling forward people that, unless you listen to this interview, you might not know a thing about them. The heart of a Tennessean, the volunteer state, is serve, and we do so largely without self-promotion.
And these are genuine people that get up every day and want to make art, or want to educate the nations, or want to have a heart of love in a way that makes a difference.
Learn from 50 years of experience, take a nugget away, and then go share it with a friend. Will Norton, welcome to Signature Required.
Thank you for having me, Spencer.
You are the head of school at St. Paul Christian Academy in Nashville, Tennessee, where you focus on advancing educational excellence and fostering a strong community spirit. Before joining St. Paul, you served as the dean of high school and taught history at Montgomery Bell Academy. In addition to your role at St. Paul, you are actively organizing the Tennessee Symposium for Online Safety and Health, demonstrating your commitment to addressing the adolescent health crisis by promoting safer online practices and encouraging open community discussions. We share a lot in common. I am an alum of St. Paul Christian Academy, where you are now the headmaster. I attended Montgomery Bell Academy, where you spent time as well.
And so from my arrival there in 2008 through my departure in 2019, that was the time when smartphones became ever present, in addition to the launch of Instagram and Snapchat. And it was one of those moments where, we were looking around just saying, what is going on? And seeing our colleagues across the city and the nation and the International Boys School Coalition that NBA is part of, it was clear that this was a worldwide trend. And so what was, really interesting for me was, really being in that space and really investing in the boys of those ages and really trying to help. I felt so handcuffed. And I felt like that, you go to the school, that you want to try to just fix the problem, but I felt so helpless towards it. And you have some great stories and some great relationships that transpire that are encouraging. But on the whole, it was something that just felt so much wider. So when those statistics came out, it articulated exactly what I had seen, experienced, and now have a great passion for the years leading up to those years as a way of saying, partnering with parents and equipping youth for that landscape is the most important task that we can do to make sure that those minefields that are so significant of this generation are minimized and that those statistics are improved.
Yeah, I was talking with some fellow moms the other day, and we were lamenting the fact that we're the only generation that has truly parented this.
Yeah.
Because it kind of came about, right? And a lot of times you might go to an aunt or a parent or a mentor and say, how did you really lead your kids through the crisis of X or Y or Z? But they didn't parent us through social media. This is really the first generation going through. So I can really relate to that feeling of helplessness because we don't know where to go. And this research is coming out that's terrifying. And I know as parents ourselves, it's like, do you get them a phone? Do you not get them a phone? What are you saying to parents that are coming to you worried about
Well,
this?
ironically, initially it was being tech savvy within a school was, a stripe, badge of honor that you wanted. And now there's, quite this tipping point that has very much gone in the other direction. And, I think what I would, the observation that I've had that's been supported by all sorts of mental health statistics is that, never before in history can you really do all the right things as parents and really not have those right things control the results that you would want for your children, because the online world is such an equalizer for all students and personalities. And it really depends on What's the wiring, social makeup of your child? How social are they? What do they stumble onto, which is so much, out of the parental control. So I would first just validate that kind of feeling of helplessness. And really the heart of the symposium is around saying, if we don't, as a broader Tennessee community, come together and say, we are moving forward towards the things that we know, which for me, right now, it's real clear that it is very risky to give a smartphone before ninth grade. I have two boys who got smartphones before ninth grade, so I say that with a lot of conviction.
You're not throwing stones.
Yeah, towards that in ways that my third grader now, will have a different experience, and I know that now. But that equation is very much a broader community equation, both because we don't want these statistics to continue, and because parents need help. They need partners, they need school partners, they need church partners, they need broader partners, they need metro, state, national legislation, that are, it's just a multifaceted issue that things like the symposium are opportunities to say, okay, what overlap, what do we really agree upon, and how do we move forward in that, and what are the things we need to think more about?
I think community as a solution is uniquely important as it relates to something like social media, because all of us are wired not to want to be excluded. And that's part of why social media is so damaging, is that it is, in a way, a mirage of inclusion. You're kind of included in somebody's life, but just in the parts of life that they want you to see, dressed up in the way that a perfect moment of a perfect life. So when us as individuals and us as parents are thinking about excluding our kids from the world of social media, it kind of taps into the core fear of why social media has been so effective to begin with.
Yeah.
And to try to take on that task alone is one that really does bring a lot of potentially shame. Like Carly and I have felt that as we've been thinking through, gosh, what if our daughter is the only one without a phone? Or what if we give them a phone really young and they're the only one with a phone? And that balance is helped when it's done in community.
Yeah.
So maybe just take for a moment and introduce the symposium and what the objective for the event is all about.
Yeah, really a nonprofit called Wired Human was mentioned by the Surgeon General this summer as a healthy advocate in regards to online health and safety, has really been a kind of a forerunner of this issue, and they kind of have three facets. There's education, there's kind of advocacy for legislation, and there's kind of student leadership and kind of coalitions that they form. And so we partnered with them as part of a Youth on the Hill program that was very much this bipartisan effort that you saw culminate with the Kids Online Safety Act with the Senate this summer, and hopefully will eventually pass the House. And what we saw with that was that there was just a lot of benefit of bringing about awareness to youth. Having them really advocate for their own health, knowing that the landscape is daunting, and that if you can educate and equip them and do that together, then it is something that really supports them during the challenges. And when I say challenges, when you are talking about what the smartphone and social media does, that those algorithms are hard for any adult to manage, much less an adolescent. And so the timing of when you give that, it's way overpowering their ability to navigate that in a healthy way, in ways that we all feel that, within our own social media world, that where we oftentimes, have to measure that to make sure that we're being healthy ourselves as 30 and 40-year-olds, and so with that, the ability to bring that group together, to give some milestones. Okay, is it the right time to be able to handle this? How do you do it in a way to where you can kind of learn it before you become an adult? And that's a hard thing, because and that's the hardest thing about parenting, is that because you're setting them up for failure in some ways, and so what is that tension, and when is that, are great questions. But I think there are some really low-lying things, such as not doing it in middle school, and really waiting for high school and entering through the challenges of that then. So Wired Human is this great partner that really tees up that conversation in a way that I think is very natural and really helpful for the students. Because if you just talk to parents, that is just one part of the equation, and parenting this is such a challenge. It is very much this holistic equation, and that's what the Symposium hopes to achieve.
Yeah, we were just at a dinner the other night talking about social media with parents, and one of the moms said, it's so hard because, to your point, you don't want to send them to college with a loaded phone that they've never used before. You want to be able to parent when someone makes a nasty gram at you or something like that, or the dating dynamics that can happen in high school. It's like scarring to even talk. Look at his face.
Nastygram. I like that. That was did you patent that or trademark that?
Can I pretend that I did? No. But at the same time, it's so hard to think, I want to let them do it in my house because I want to parent it, because part of what you want to do as a parent is protect them from all the horrible things, which brings me to a quote that was in The Anxious Generation, right? That it says, today we overprotect our children and adolescents in the real world, but underprotect them in the virtual world. How do we, maybe this is a question for all of us to noodle, how do we navigate the tension of that?
Yeah, and you will get a full spectrum of that. So I don't pretend to have the silver bullet. I'm glad to share kind of what I feel and what I see, is that I think it's healthy to work that out to a degree when they are age appropriate within the home, because I've seen too many, call them time bombs of, you get through to 18 and yes, they have gotten through there, but they don't have the resilience or the conviction to be able to step out on their own. And so then it just becomes a delayed problem that becomes a problem in college, where I see it much more risky because they're not under your house. And to the Jonathan Haidt book, the piece of, over-parenting, I think, that giving a leash that is appropriate so that they learn how to navigate the digital world and have digital citizenship that's healthy is an important thing. And not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to say, yeah, my child made a mistake. But they grew from it and are stronger because of it. And that's what you want in parenting. You don't want this perfect, often, and I saw that, I wrestled with that challenge so much when I was working in the high school, is that, so much of the expectation becomes, just for this kind of bump-free journey, which oftentimes can be, in reality, more about ourselves, just like, oh, well, we raised this, perfect child.
Because you live the pain with them.
Yeah.
Every time they're hurting, you're hurting.
Exactly.
And so it's almost like you want bump-free parenting more than you're worried about bump-free childhood.
And the broader culture of us saying, you know what, life is hard. The teenager years are hard. That they, the reason that the prodigal son parable is so wonderful is that you it expresses it. You leave the home, you have to work it out for yourself. And when you leave and you become desperate, then you come back and you have the conviction to be, the adults that we want our children to be, but those journeys are oftentimes imperfect. So I think that fear of failure is significant with it, which is more of a parent question than what's healthiest for the kid. I think it's much more healthy to just be an authentic community where you're transparent over it. You're not afraid to make a mistake. You're not afraid to, call it out when there's a challenge, around you in ways that breed that and ultimately are for the betterment of the adolescents that are going through it. And then that teaches them a message of, I can be myself. I can be authentic, to that. And I don't have to have this mask to pretend like everything's going okay when actually internally I'm a mess. That is something that is very healthy for teenagers to have, and something that I'm hopeful for. And I'm doing it imperfectly with 2 teenagers now myself.
Mm-hmm. I think the parenting aspect of this is really important because as a kid that is consuming social media, their brains, their frontal lobe is not fully developed until they are 25.
Yeah.
And for those that are not neuroscientists, all of us, your frontal lobe is the one responsible for logical decision making.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty important aspect to making it through life. We don't let kids drink alcohol until 21. We don't let them vote till 18. We don't let them get a rental car till 25.
Yeah.
So having a dependent pressure upon a kid to have to navigate social media, which we now know from the intro that social media is a cause of anxiety, not just a correlation or coincidence, but an actual cause. In the same way that alcohol causes you to get drunk, it has a meaningful impact upon your brain. So when you think about it in your unique chair as the head of a school, and the head of a school that doesn't go up into high school, but your colleagues and peers are living in all those spaces, how do you feel like the world of leadership is viewing where social media consumption has or does not have a place inside of schools right now?
Yeah, no, I think what I'm seeing with social media and kind of this recent schools reaction is that there has, with the data from the Jonathan Haidt book and other sources and people just having really tough stories, that schools are going to policies that are restricting that from the school world. And so really it becomes probably more of a parenting question, I think, is over time, because I think over time schools will generally, move to solidarity of that even in the high school, whereas, 5 or 6 years ago it was very permissive in regards to, allowing that.
And what does that look like? Like a ban on phones, a ban on social media?
Yeah, that there's punitive consequences if you have it out, but it's restricted. You're not supposed to have it out at all. During the day. And in doing so, you are giving the gift of 8 hours or so a day where you are not on that. So that even if you are in high school and you have a phone and that short leash that parents, at some point probably should give it before they become a legal adult and can do it on their own, that they have a limited time for it to really affect them. And what you see, to your biological point, I always laugh, if it's true what the therapists say that you always go back to your greatest place of trauma, then it's no surprise that I immediately went back and started working in a high school. Ninth grade, no matter which way you cut it, they're hard years. And when I was at MBA, 90% of my parent meetings were with ninth grade parents, because they're like, what is going on with my child? And it's like, wow, these are just hard years. You become, your body's changing. You become socially self-conscious. You kind of go in the shell. You respond in so many different ways. And so many parents are like, what is going on? And, wanting to fix it. And it's like, just hold on tight, and then sure enough, by junior year, I wouldn't call it maturity, but there's a settledness that just biologically comes. And then when they get in their 20s, things, that logic of, ability to do it is ability to really think logically fully comes back in ways that how do we establish the guardrails that they can go through what are hard years, no matter which way you look at it, with this smartphone generation, to where they can learn how to be healthy individuals and ultimately have the conviction at the mid-20s. And so I think school leadership is really figuring that out, but it's a lot of unknowns. And I feel like that in 5 or 6 years we're going to have it in a much better place, both at the legislative level and at the community level. But what you see is kind of this response, and I think it's a good response that creates just kind of safe havens to where you're not doing that, and then it's more of a parenting question of, is it something that's cut off at a certain hour so that they can sleep, and sleep deprivation is a huge part of health, and the issues just escalate, depending on whether those healthy parameters are there, and understanding what are those healthy parameters, I think is one of the goals of the Symposium, and one of the things that as a St. Paul head of school that I want to equip parents with, so that they go into those years knowing, having a roadmap for what they need.
I like the idea about guardrails. We were just talking to our 13-year-old about her phone over the weekend and this overwhelming temptation that she has a phone, but she's not allowed to use any of the apps, right? And Spence and I have this experience that we hand her a phone because in middle school, all of a sudden the schools don't communicate with parents anymore. They're telling your student, hey, you're getting picked up at this time, or this change, or you need that. And I had no way to communicate with my kid to know even where she was on the campus. So you hand her this phone thinking, oh, I'm trying to keep her safe. Now I can find her. Now she can get to us. But I've literally handed her what feels like a ticking time bomb into her pocket. And so we were just talking to her about, hey, you're not allowed on this app or that app. And the overwhelming temptation she's going through looking at her friends. She's like, I don't have it, but can I sit next to my buddy while she's looking at it?
Yeah.
Can we do that in study hall and trying to parent? It's just, we had that exact conversation. It was really hard because you feel for her, and you also hate being the meanie, but half of good parenting is like being willing to be mean. And so we just had that experience.
Yeah, it's hard. And they, teenagers are very, probably much smarter than adults in regards to this. And so you have any access to online, and you're going to have social media, that you can create. And that's where it's okay to fail. It's okay to, once, as you discover those things, to have those conversations. And ultimately, if there was one advice to parents, that I would have is just that connection, that's the most important part, that it can be messy, there are going to be some hard times. It's part of growing up. It's part of parenting. But if you have that connection and they have the feel that they can come to you and talk about it and talk about the challenges of it, and you can sit with them in that, that is the gold of these years. And even if there are some hard times and some hard years, because I think as parents, we don't want to necessarily fix it all, but we can sit with them in it, connect with them, and that ultimately is going to build the resilience that they want, that over time, when that brain comes fully around, they'll say, hey, mom connected with me in this, got me through that. I dabbled with it a little bit, and now I've got a lot of conviction behind why I don't want to do it. And then that's, I feel like, the success stories that we want.
In your place of leadership, you would be able to speak a strong voice into a lot of different topics. So this symposium could be on school safety. It could be a symposium upon Tennessee having an 18% dropout rate for public school kids. It could be a symposium on what types of books should be in our library. I mean, there's no shortage of things that you could pull from the grab bag of ways to make waves in policy change and education. So how does this connect into your story and your personal passion for the choice for this topic? to be in the symposium?
Yeah, I think it's just majoring on the majors, meaning that if I were to point to, the one issue over that decade of working closely with the teenage years, that this, challenge would be the one. And I feel like that culturally we're at such a tipping point because I think the data of Jonathan Haidt has really cultivated that in great ways, and that really what we've experienced with the smartphone and seeing it wreak havoc on all lives, but in particular adolescent lives, that's something that we can't just sit back and watch and just hope that it plays out in better ways. That the statistics of 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 7 boys with a major mental health event, if you give the cell phone or smartphone at too early an age, we need to get to the place where, as a community, that it just feels way too risky. It's like driving without a seatbelt on the interstate and 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That it feels that type of level of riskiness as a parent, and so educating and kind of getting that word out. I don't think that there's a more important topic, and that's mostly what are the students of St. Paul, most importantly, because that's where I'm working, but also, within Middle Tennessee, and certainly I've got 2 teenage boys, that, what are the issues that are going to be most dangerous to them? And I think that this topic covers it.
I wonder, I have the privilege of knowing a little bit about your background. I mean, ROTC Wake Forest. You did 2 tours in Iraq. How does your military background, your kind of willingness to fight for what is right, how do you think that informs your thoughts on this today?
Yeah, no, I think the ROTC time and being the Iraq War kicked off of March of my senior year at Wake, and the 9/11 towers fell my sophomore year, and so was really launched into a worldwide crisis, in regards to the Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And so in stepping into that as an Army officer, it was kind of almost a master's in leadership. I mean, I showed up in Kuwait and had a little platoon, and they said, okay, you're going to drive along the most dangerous stretch in the world to Saddam's hometown of Tikrit, and we'll see you when you get there. and so here we are, leading this caravan of, and just being like, I'm 23 years old. So they literally just throw you into scenarios like that where you learn leadership. It was responsibility that was tremendous and was a great, honor to serve. With the transition from that, and I've had many of fellow officers and soldiers that were challenged. I think one of the greatest gifts in regards to the transition from those environments outside of the military into the civilian world is that oftentimes the kind of greater disparity of purpose between having this great sense of purpose. I mean, it was such a great sense of mission within those, conflicts of where I was in Tikrit and Ramadi, and with that, when you look to transition out, if there's a disparity between the purpose that you experience in the military versus what you go into in the civilian, meaning that you don't feel like that there's a great sense of purpose, then I think that's where the space of the PTSD, wreaks havoc in individuals. I was so grateful. I was applying to Vanderbilt to get my master's because I loved history, wanted to teach history, didn't really know much about education. I was thankfully offered an internship at MBA where I was able to teach history, and it's almost like the mission continued in regards to the lives of teenagers in a way that I just fell in love with it. I didn't know anything about administration, but taught and got into administration and my Army kind of organization and that part, really resonated with the administrative world and into a calling that I was grateful for. And ultimately, really, Heather and I look back and think that was probably one of the healthiest things that we could have done to transition, even though there were some hard moments with that. But that ultimately that was something that was a huge gift to me, and hopefully was a mutual blessing to those that I worked with.
Well, and focusing on the symposium of saying, all right, this is our mission, this is what we're going to target, and we're going to make the biggest impact possible.
Yeah.
As an outsider, I can imagine hearing about yet another conversation on social media that is going to make me feel bad as a parent or more anxious or just like I've failed.
Yeah.
Because some people are already well down the road of, okay, my kid's just sitting in your spot. They already have a phone. They've had a phone for longer than what they were supposed to have a phone. So can you speak to someone that's listening that is thinking about whether they should come or not, leaning towards not because they're not really interested in a lecture of why they haven't done great as a parent on something according to, whatever the culture is going to tell them. Can you speak to what they might expect and what the feeling of the symposium will have in store for them?
Yeah, and I would say that the notion of just knowing that the humility of life can hit in different ways, and this is just recognizing that this is one of the greatest challenges that this generation of youth will face, and that everybody's got a really humble posture with that. There's nobody that's got this silver bullet that is coming through, and that's not even, I think, probably the right paradigm for how you want to view these ages, because really, what does it look like? The question that I think the symposium will answer is, what does it look like to be in community, to know what health looks like, and for us to rally around that, which is as much of a community discussion as it is, something that we are going to necessarily receive from the symposium. Now, there will be some keynotes that are wonderful. Jason Frost, who's the founder of Wired Human and has become a real national leader in regards to this movement, in regards to his relationship on Capitol Hill, and then also what he has done with youth has been tremendous, and he's working in states across America to do the same. And then we have Catherine Price, who was referred to us from Jonathan Haidt, and is very much in that type of stream of what does it look like to navigate this in a healthy way. So I think that there's going to be some very practical takeaways and an equipping on the parent side, a messaging on the student side, and then community leaders are welcome as well, where we'll have breakout groups to think through, okay, what's working, what are you seeing as we kind of navigate this together. So I hope that it'll be a humble posture of not having all the answers, but being in the room together, knowing that if we lock arms together and really press into this, that hopefully it'll be for the better of this generation, and I think that it will accomplish that.
So I just want to pull one thing out. Whenever I hear the word symposium, I think, okay, I need to get a sitter. They were going to be sitting for a really long time. But what I hear you saying is kids, teens, youth that are dealing with this issue are encouraged to also come. It's not just an old people event.
Yeah,
right?
No, 5th through 12th grade are the ages. And so schools are bringing whole grades, in ways that gets that messaging. And Wired Human is actually developing a curriculum that really educates on the minefields of online world, so that there's kind of this equalizer, and so because things like extortion, and you can stumble into that so easily and think that you're communicating with a friend, and next thing you know, somebody's extorting you in ways that can be confusing as a adolescent. And so really, having, the equipping of that, while also everybody, parents, students, community leaders, having the same messaging so that we can point back to the milestones of where we need to be and try to create that solidarity within each of our communities and for hopefully what will be a healthier community.
I also think from a bipartisan legislative perspective too, there's a lot of people that can come that serve on school boards, that serve on
Correct.
boards of their school, that can come and say, all right, rather than just guessing at what policy initiatives work, let's come together and see what we can do. Is it a total phone ban during the day? Is it a restricted access? How should we think about schools that are taking photos at every social event, every sport event, posting it to social media, and then turning around the other side and saying social media is not good?
Yeah.
It makes a really tough balance, but it's what I appreciate about the bipartisan nature of this is that it doesn't and shouldn't be political. Senator Marsha Blackburn, a self-professed one of the most right senators in our U.S. Senate, has paired up with a senator that is self-professed the most left in the Senate. And we're talking the United States Senate to come together on the Child Online Safety Act. And that's been a 3.5-year mission for the Senate to get it passed. And it's not signed into law yet, but we could be getting close to that in hopefully the next 12 months. And I think Tennessee, as a leader, could also say, we have the same problem here in Tennessee that all the rest of the states do. But what an opportunity for us to be a leader in saying, here are answers. And I think that is something that should broaden this out to, you don't have to have kids to show up at this event and say, I care about my community. Because we know how detrimental social media is becoming, and it's not going to get any better. They're just figuring out better algorithms to keep you on there for longer. And I can't tell you the number of times I pull up my phone and that accursed little red bubble with the notifications. That is a drug. It is a drug. I open it up and I'll clear my notifications, and not 15 seconds later, there's another notification on there.
I know, you're not above the scroll.
I know.
Yeah.
You're not alone.
None
there.
of us are.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a really unique opportunity for community leaders to discuss and hopefully have some meaningful takeaways, for parents to be equipped and be in the room of, how do you walk in connection with this landscape and have the appropriate guardrails and boundaries within what you allow when for your teen or middle schooler, and then for the students, it'll be an opportunity for them to hear from peers, from people who have been there and learned the hard way, and an equipping for them that hopefully will strengthen their conviction towards greater health.
Well, do you ever hear, because the inner debater in me loves to look at both sides of every argument and say, an excellent debater is marked by their ability to articulate both positions, and you as the listener can't particularly tell which position they personally prefer. And so I sit with this social media issue knowing that I personally believe in the very negative and damaging effects of it. But I wonder what the other argument is. And the smallest bit that I know that I hear from people is saying that social media is the way that I stay connected to people that I don't see anymore. Maybe they've moved on the other side of the country. Maybe they have certain limitations through their social anxiety that allow them to have some bit of connection to the outside world. And as I try to structure the argument from the other side of saying, let's not be too rash here, let's not be too harsh, are there any other ones that you hear or that you're particularly sympathetic to say, here's why we shouldn't go and just shut these companies down that are doing social media? Because I think that's on the table for a certain percentage of the U.S. population that would say, we were better before Facebook. before Instagram
Yeah.
and before TikTok and infinite scrolls that are there.
Yeah, no, I think, of course, it taps into that need to connect, but I think the limitations of it is that what humans really need is authentic in-person connection, and so, like anything, in moderation, it's fine, and if you are able to, manage that in a healthy way, then it's not an issue. And if your social media connection is one that leads to personal connection, that is what human beings really need, then that's not a bad thing. And so I think that it will. I don't suspect that social media will go away. I mean, I think my hope for it is that digital citizenship, which was randomly legislated at 13 in 1997, before anything was really known about the landscape of what we would be eventually entering, that has to get more, because that is way too young, and so, and then beyond that, I think, like anything, whether it be drugs or alcohol, that
or rental cars.
Yeah, exactly. Probably alcohol is a better, but if after 21 you don't do it in moderation, then you're going to get in trouble. And so I don't foresee that industry going away in the same way that social media. But and then how do you manage that? How do you manage digital citizenship? Because then you're tracking, if you are signing in and you have your birth date on there, and then they're tracking your every footprint, then wherever you go can be used in ways that are challenging. So it is a challenging landscape to be able to regulate in a healthy way, so that you can have a kind of baseline of age. And then, beyond that, what does health look like? I think it's, a lot of awareness, education, community, and ultimately us being able to give what human beings really need, which is, authentic one-on-one connection, which I think are the things that do build health, because I think that we're finding the social media world is pretty limited on that really beneficial kind of piece of what's constructive for humans.
One thing I really am excited about for the symposium, something that's I think Spence and I have really loved in parenting and in marriage in general, is we always talk about trying to have a common language.
Yeah.
So anytime one of us consumes content that we find super helpful, it could be about any of those topics, we always try to get the other person to read it or watch it, so that we have the same language or buzzword with one another when we're dealing, even just talking to each other. And so I feel like that's what you're talking about that's totally missing in this space as parents, is we do not have a common language. So maybe my kid has a phone, but they don't have social media, or maybe I'm worried about this and not that. All of a sudden, the goal here is to get all of the buzz terms in one place. I mean, in full disclosure, for my mental health, I got off social media in a meaningful way about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's a lifetime in technology. So now I feel like an ignoramus. I don't know what any of these things are or how to work them. And Spence could tell you, I can't even remember my passwords. I can't even get in. I'm locked out, blasted two-factor authentication. So I'm looking forward to having common language with my peer group.
Well, and I think to just validate that step, I mean, I think what oftentimes is unhealthy, there's I was close with a ministry called J.H. Ranch, where there was an adage where, it's caught, not taught. It's kind of the notion of do as I say, not as I do. But the ways that teenagers, they're going to forget what you say. They're going to remember the way that you made them feel, and they are going to be watching every bit of what you do. So I would say that what you're modeling for your children is one of health, that even though you may be disconnected, they're watching that, and that ultimately they may have some fits and spats of, exploration, but that eventually they'll come back around to that in ways that will be even more healthy. And I think that's what's most convicting as parents, is that from work worlds and even just our own impulses in regards to social media, that oftentimes those can be in unhealthy spots, and then that is what this next generation are seeing. And so that's a key factor that I think is part of that health equation that's convicting.
And I think I'm most interested in the practical, legislative, or real changes that we can make.
Yeah.
That some of them are going to be experimental. Like one of the things, whether we're supposed to call it Twitter or X now, they have a limitation per day on how many times you can refresh your scroll at the top. Now, I think it's at 1,000, which, they're setting that bar way out there.
Yeah.
But I think it is the first step to saying, if you are scrolling your Twitter feed more than 1,000 times a day, that is demonstrably unhealthy.
Yeah.
And that may be where we have to start, to where it says, if you're on Facebook 10 hours a day, that's demonstrably unhealthy.
Yeah.
And if it starts, just where can we agree?
Yeah.
And I think that is what I have the greatest hope for out of the symposium, to say, where can we agree, and let's go from there.
Yeah.
Because there is a place, if the U.S. Senate can agree on anything, then we can agree that it's something important. Well, I really appreciate your leadership on this topic and choosing this one amongst a lot of different ones. I think Carly said it really well earlier, that this is the very first time that we have had to parent this, and that anyone has had to parent this. We've been having to parent alcohol for generations, thousands of years. We've had to parent cigarettes for a handful of generations now, and all sorts of stuff. But this really is one that carries with it unique qualities of shame and uncertainty that ties into that everyone wanting to be involved in community, and to have the right balance and to teach in that capacity is something that we're excited to support your mission in that, and bring this to a really large and robust audience that needs it, because there's a generational impact that is going to be made through the decisions that are being legislated right now. So thank you.
Really grateful for that advocacy and partnership and support, and look forward to a great event.